Welcome to episode 4 of Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom. My name is Wilder Adams, and thank you all so much for hopping in on this latest episode of Wilder Wolves. We are recording about 24 hours away from the 2025 NBA draft from the moment I'm recording this right now, and it's not going to be as long of an episode as a couple, for example, Zach Rudines of T-Wolves Country and Joel Miranda Pick Aside. Those were toward an hour, if not longer. This one's going to be a little shorter. It's going to be kind of an appetizer as we get ready for the 2025 NBA draft as it's NBA draft eve right now. So the plan on this episode, I am going to give you guys my favorite potential options at pick 17, pick 31, and also talk about some draft scenarios that might be fun, a little bit sexy, like trading up in the draft. There's not like a ton of buzz about Minnesota trading up into the draft, but Darren Wolfson reported that Minnesota has some interest. So I mean, you can't never say never, right? There's some possibility there. So today it's gonna be quicker. I'm going to give you guys my 3 favorite options at 17 and 31. And then I'm just going to say my favorite trade up target, as well as I got a couple of really cool trades that some followers have given me on social media that I think are really fun and really fascinating to consider when we just look at the wide range of Minnesota possibilities, because we know there's endless Minnesota possibilities with Tim Connolly at GM. And by the way, speaking of Tim Connolly, isn't it really interesting how Tim Connolly, when he traded for Rudy Gobert, everybody basically said Minnesota forfeited their future. They forfeited all their first-round picks, all of their young assets to build around Anthony Edwards. Well, let's do the math right now, okay? So they traded for Rudy Gobert in 2022. They had 1 first-round pick in that draft. They had Wendell Moore. He didn't work out, but he was a first-round pick. No draft picks in 2023 in the first round. They took Leonard Miller, 33rd overall. 2024, 2 first-round picks, trading up for Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. That draft also showing the unpredictable nature of Tim Connolly and some moves he could always pull that you never expect. And this year, you have pick 17. And next season, Minnesota owns its own 2026 first-round pick. So I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure each team is given 1 first-round pick a year. And after next year, Minnesota is currently projected to have taken 5 first-round picks in 4 years. So I would just say I think that Tim Connolly is showing that the theory that he gave up all of these first-round picks is pretty much baloney, because he has gotten all of them back and then some with recent trades. And he's a great GM, and it's going to be really fun watching him ride this Timberwolves ship going forward, because, of course, today as well, we'll go into it more in a future episode about the ownership of the Timberwolves. But today, June 24th, 2025, the Minnesota Timberwolves are officially owned by Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez's camp. So now we can officially, shed away the Glenn Taylor era and push forward toward this golden age era, which is going to be something that this podcast is going to continually celebrate, the fact that this Timberwolves team is just in the golden age of Timberwolves history. And tomorrow, the 2025 NBA draft, hopefully that's another step toward an Anthony Edwards dynasty in Minnesota, right? A man could dream. But so I'm going to start out by giving my 3 favorite options at 17. Granted, these aren't the only 3 options, and there's a lot of guys who could be available. Who knows? The draft's so unpredictable. Maybe 2 of these guys are unavailable at 17, or they take another guy that a lot of us like at 17. I won't complain if one of these guys isn't taken by Minnesota and they take another guy. It just really depends on where the board ends up, right? It's not going to be like Dallas passing on Cooper Flagg if they don't take one of my guys. But let's just take a quick look at potential options that Minnesota can take at pick 17. So my number 1 Minnesota Timberwolves option at 17, who I would want Minnesota to take if he was ever so available, Thomas Sorber of Georgetown University. So I think he's very popular in the Timberwolves community, Timberwolves Twitter, all over the place. But this guy he feels like a blend of a 2000s big, like a 2000s power forward, but he's also modern as well. He is a 6'9" center, which sounds a little short, but that's not in shoes. So he's actually like 6'10" and a half-ish. And then he's also possessing a 7'6" wingspan, which is the longest in this draft class, I believe. And this is the trend you guys are going to see. I love, like what LeBron James says.
Obviously, Ant Edwards, a lot of length. Jaden McDaniels, length. Cat, length. Rudy, length. You know, they come off with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, length.
I love length, and I hope we get length. He's got the longest wingspan in the draft. He is a defensive-minded big, and of course, we really want that in the Anthony Edwards era because Rudy Gobert, we've seen the identity he's helped transform in Minnesota as a defensive identity team, and outside of Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert and the identity he brings to this Minnesota Timberwolves culture is as big of a game changer as anything. So I want to continue that trend at 17. You get a Thomas Sorber who is a great defender in a lot of ways. He's a talented rim protector, high IQ, good hands, good instincts, really good as a weak side defender. He's 6'9", and usually you'd want a 6'9" guy to be a little more mobile in the perimeter. And he's not terrible in the perimeter, but you definitely wish he would have quicker feet. And I think a part of that is he's around 265. And I think the dream idea of Thomas Sorber, in my mind, is somebody who is that nimble big. So maybe that means in the NBA he cuts 20 pounds. I'm not saying that as like he needs to hit the gym, bro. Like I could cut 20 pounds probably. But he is definitely somebody who, if he's a little more nimble, kind of like Naz Reid when he came into the NBA, it could really propel his game on the defensive end. And that's how he could become potentially the best defensive big in the draft. And he's not only a defender, granted. Offensively, he's got some pretty fun, connective skill sets. I like to compare his offensive game plan or gameplay to a Isaiah Hartenstein, who just won the championship for the Thunder, right? He's not going to take step back threes. He's not going to do the Wemby crap where he's going to spin and throw behind the back pass in transition. He's not going to do that, but he's a very smart, high post playmaker, really good at finding cutters, ball movers. He's a solid screener. He could just kind of, like a 2000s big offensively, just kind of get the ball in that 15-foot elbow, navigate the court, and just make reads like that. And I could see some like DHO actions between Sorber and Anthony Edwards. And he's also got sort of a mid-range game going for him. He's got a little jab step, pull-up mid-range shot that he likes to get to, a good mid-range shooter. Didn't shoot great in college from three, below 20% from three. But I do think he's got the touch to eventually extend if Minnesota wants him to. And he shot over 70% on the line. So he's somebody who can bring you, some of those defensive intangibles Rudy can. You can never replace Rudy Gobert because he has tied the most defensive players of the years in Timberwolves history, but he is somebody who can really defend, who has a chance to be the best defensive big in the draft, somebody who can kind of maintain that identity and maybe potentially fit a more fast-paced, spread-out Timberwolves type style when Anthony Edwards hits his age 26, 27 season, especially if he gets nimble. He had a foot injury at the end of this season, so that's going to be something to monitor. And that's another reason why I'm not an NBA doctor. Please don't take it that way. I'm not an NBA expert with player bodies, but like maybe if he's 20 pounds lighter, he'll be more nimble on his feet and maybe healthier. I hope so. That's my thought. And I just think he'd be a really good center connector in the next Anthony Edwards iteration with some of the offensive versatility he provides, while also still having that elite length at the center position that can really fit into this team's long-term defensive identity. So I'm a Sorber fan, and as a freshman, he really changed Georgetown's trajectory as a team. They had their best most winningest season in a decade with Sorber as the best player. And not many people talk about that, but that impact as a freshman is rare. I think he should be a lottery pick, but it wouldn't be shocking if he falls out of the lottery, right? Because depending on team needs, somebody like Beringer could fly up, another center from Europe who I really like. He's a really hyper, bouncy, athletic, rim protecting big. But I think Sorber is a really good fit in Minnesota. If you want somebody who can play right away, also somebody who I think could turn into an NBA starter if things work out. And if you get an NBA starter at pick 17, that's a great pick. So let's go to the next draft selection I really like. Like I said, I like length, and every single player in this list has elite length. Rasheer Fleming is my second pick. Rasheer Fleming is a 6'8" wing with a 7'5" wingspan. He's got, among wings, the longest arms in this year's NBA draft. And that is, of course, somebody you just think about the possibilities of a wing with that type of length. That is somebody who has really high potential as a team defender, as a weak side rim protector, because he's got really freaking long arms. Do I have to complicate this? I mean, he's got long arms. I wish I had long arms. Maybe I'll be playing basketball, but I don't. I don't have long arms at all. He's got those long arms that you can put him at the 3, at the 4, maybe some small ball 5 in the NBA. He had over 8 rebounds a game in college basketball this year. And he's also somebody on the offensive side of the ball who shoots nearly 40% from 3. We'll see how real that is in terms of he wasn't a great shooter his first couple years of college, but he didn't shoot nearly 40% from 3 this year. He has a nice compact shot. If you guys remember Anthony Tolliver with the Minnesota Timberwolves, when the team stunk before Anthony Edwards, he has a very similar form. Anthony Tolliver was the guy who blocked Giannis in a basketball game, but he was also, at one point when Minnesota had no dependable shooters, it felt like, he felt like somebody who had a dependable shot. And I really like the ideas of having just as many freaking long wings you can possibly have to build a defensive identity with. He's a good defender already. He doesn't have elite mobility laterally. I don't think it's terrible, but he is a little bit boxy as an athlete. So that's a con, and probably part of why I don't foresee him being a top 10 pick, because he doesn't have that elite agility. But I think he moves fine, and I think he's got really good length. And I just think he could be a good team defender on the Timberwolves. I think he's got a lot of upside in that way. And somebody who can nail threes like that, somebody who could be a cutter. He's a quick jumper as well, I should mention. So not somebody I expect to become like the superstar, unless there's some outlier development, because he's got the physical tools. There's no doubt about that to me. And if that jump shot is real and he can really maximize what he has in terms of God-given ability, he could be a big-time piece for Minnesota, somebody who could be like a $25 million player plus in the NBA. So I really like Fleming, and he has a lot of mobility potential with his team, especially because he's such a great rebounder for his position. So I think that Fleming would be a really interesting option at pick 17. Here's the last name I'm going to mention. I'm maintaining this trend. I am not jumping off of this. Let's talk about Cedric Howard a little bit. He's a shooting guard who's about 6'6" with a 7'2" wingspan. I promise I didn't go on Draft Combine and just look up who had the longest arms and say, I'm going to put this on my show today. But honestly, if I did that, it would probably save me a lot of time. But he's got length. He's got a lot of length. And I feel like I'm sounding like, I feel like my basketball intelligence sounds very minimal right now because I keep saying length. But I really like long arms. If you guys get to know me, as you guys get to know me, I really like long arms. He's got length that give him high-level defensive potential. Wasn't a great defender in college. Doesn't have great defensive analytics. But you could trust, you put him in a Minnesota system, and you ask him to be that type of defender. And he doesn't have to play right away. So when he's ready to be that type of defender that Minnesota needs, he could play. And this is a 40% shooter from three. Really cool story. Came into college, D3 level basketball, worked his way up to Washington State. And he only played 6 games this year because he had a season-ending injury. But in those 6 games, highly efficient, showed his versatility as a shooter, as a shot maker. I feel like everybody is looking for the next Jalen Williams now, since Jalen Williams was just the second best player on a championship team and also the 4th player in NBA history to make an all-star game, all-NBA team, all-defensive team while winning a title in his first 3 seasons. The other players to do that are Magic Johnson, Tim Duncan, or no, not Magic Johnson, Bill Walton, Larry Bird, Tim Duncan, and Jalen Williams. So everybody's going to look for the next Jalen Williams, and he's going to get a lot of Jalen Williams comps in that way. I don't think he's as dynamic of a creator as Jalen Williams, but he does kind of have like a diet Chris Middleton type game when I watch him, the way he rises up, the way he scores. Not like a freaky, powerful athlete, but a fluid athlete, and just somebody who can play on your wing, put the ball on the deck, be another 2-level creator. That's what a guy like Coward could be. And do I have concerns that he hasn't put together like one great basketball season at a D1 level? Yeah, I would say that a little bit. But that's why he's not my number 1 or number 2 option at pick 17. If we end up with Coward, I'd be happy because he's a calculated talent. He's got the ideas down. He is a great idea player with that length, that shot making ability. And let's just hope he puts it into fruition. So I really like the idea of getting Coward. The theme I want Minnesota to pursue in this year's draft, I want them to continue adding to what they already have. I don't want another 6-foot point guard. I want Rob Dillingham to develop. If you want a point guard, get that in free agency. I want somebody who could be a great connector and build on what Minnesota has. Minnesota has a lot of length, a lot of defense. I would love if my young player can do that. Minnesota could use another center, but Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, if they keep Naz Reid, they can maintain 48 minutes combined together, and you won't need a center. But, it would be nice to have a center as a project to replace Rudy eventually. So if I had to pick a position, I would love a good young center. But most importantly, like I said, I just want a wing or just a versatile player who can connect and build on what Minnesota does. I don't think Minnesota has to complicate this draft pick too much. You don't have to swing because you have your superstar. And I want to continue this philosophy with my next couple options at pick 31. I've only watched about 40 or so guys in this year's draft class. So if there's somebody I'm missing, you're probably right. But I have done about as much homework as I could on this draft class. And from everybody I've heard, it sounds like this draft class, once you get into the late 30s, things start to slip a little bit in terms of just depth and talent because a lot of potential first-round picks, they came back to college. So these are my options at pick 31. The first one I'm going to say at pick 31 is Tyrese Proctor from Duke. Now, Tyrese Proctor is interesting because he's been on the draft radar for a long time. Like starting 2024, he was a potential lottery pick in that year's draft. And no, the draft isn't it. The 2024 draft wasn't that bad, or if he stayed, he would have been a lottery pick. He slipped down the board, and that's why he came back to college. He never became that high-level player they expected him at Duke. But over time, he became a really high-level connector. He had a really good year for Duke, high-level shooter. I think they wanted him to be a primary point guard creator. I just don't think he is that. I think the dream idea of Tyrese Proctor is this Derek White type of guy who is a guard with some size, pretty good defense. He's taken the pressure off the primary guy with his shooting, with some of the pressure he can create with the ball, with some of his defense and his playmaking intuition. He has a lot of those high-level connector type things at the guard position. I think everybody's looking for the next Derek White, and Derek White is like the Michael Jordan of this archetype. But Tyrese Proctor, I think if he works in the NBA, he is going to have a similar type impact to that type of player. Maybe not to the same level, but somebody kind of like Dante with Minnesota a little bit, right? With our team. He's somebody who can just make the life of a guard easier. And that's what's going to really separate him at the NBA level if he works out. He's not dynamic enough for me to take him at 17. He hasn't showed the ceiling to take him at 17, nor has he taken that type of leap in college ever to make me believe he's going to take this massive leap in the NBA. But I think Tyrese Proctor is a safe prospect in the second round, somebody who has a pretty good chance of being a contributor as a backup. And maybe if everything works out, he's a fringe starter. But he's just somebody who can make life simpler for the Timberwolves. And I really like him in that idea as a connector. I have two more players I'm going to mention at pick 31 before we really get into the fun stuff for the rest of the podcast. So my last two names, they're centers, because even though I just said I want just somebody who doesn't overcomplicate the team and just kind of fits in, and I'm not that worried about position and need, I would still really like another center on this roster. Just another really big, giant guy outside of Rudy Gobert who can really just alter things in the paint. That would be my dream. So I think the perfect guy to mention at pick 31 as a candidate to do just that, Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton. So this was a two-time Defensive Player of the Year finalist in college. And he won the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year last season in his fifth year. He's an older prospect. He's 23 years old. But he was one of the most dominant two-way bigs in college basketball for the past few years. He averaged over 19 points a game last year, won Defensive Player of the Year, around 3 blocks a game the last couple years. When I watch him, I'm not looking at somebody who is like this ultra mobile, unicorn type player, but I think he's got NBA touch for a 5 from everything I've seen. Like, he's got some solid touch at the NBA level. I think his number one calling card is going to be as a rim protector. That is thing number one. He probably doesn't have the mobility to be like playing high wall defense or just being this guy who runs up and down the floor, but he can block shots. Offensively, he's got good touch. He's got a little bit of a nasty to him. And he shot 34.5% from three last year, nearly 70% from the line. So maybe there's some touch stuff there. So he's not going to provide you the mobility you would want at the 5, like a long-term starter next to Edwards, because after Rudy Gobert, in my personal opinion, I could be wrong, I think it would make a lot of sense to kind of move toward a direction in which you're playing with a more, nimble, quick 5 who allows Anthony Edwards to play in pace. But this guy, he's got talent. He's got talent. He's got the hands. He's got the, good enough skill. And he was a great defender in college, and he's a day one rim protector in the NBA. He's not going to be the most versatile defender in the NBA, but he's got the length. He's got the rim protection. 9'4" standing reach, another guy, 7'6" wingspan, a 33-inch vertical, which is really freaking good for a 7'3" center. Not to mention his vertical was like 1 inch less than Ace Bailey, who people try to compare to Tracy McGrady. So Kalkbrenner has got the verticality. He's got the rim protection. I think he'd be a really good pick at pick 31. Currently, on Takeathon, he's 31st on their big board. So he's somebody who feels like a fairly realistic option at pick 31. It wouldn't be surprising if he went 20s, but if he's there in the second round, I would say, why not? Go get Kalkbrenner if he's there at 31, if they don't take a center at 17. And my last name I will mention is another center, Hanson Yang, man. Hanson Yang. He is fun. He posted a video the other week about training with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and in the video, he's nailing like 5 straight threes from the corner. They're bringing him up on the wing, on the perimeter, and he's throwing bounce passes to cutters. This is a very unique talent. He's massive. He's over 7 feet, around 7'3", I believe. He's got super long arms as well. Shocker, based on the players I selected as my favorite options here. But he's got skill. He's got real skill. He's got really good feet in the block. He can spin. He's just got really polished feet. He likes to compare himself to Jokic and Şengün, and I'm not going to go that far, but there's no doubt he has very unique feet for that size. He's a high-level passer. He is somebody who has a nasty at the rim as well. Like, this is a guy who's thrown self alley-oops in games, somebody who wants to wham it on you, somebody who can shoot it from the mid-range, from three. His efficiency from three isn't great. He shot below 30% from three in the CBA, but he is somebody with good touch and I believe potential as a shooter. So he's somebody with really good upside. And defensively, like Kalkbrenner, he's not going to be the most like incredible switcher, guarding guards on the point of attack in the perimeter. As a matter of fact, like, you've seen some videos, and when I watched those videos, my first thought was he kind of moves like Rudy Gobert in the perimeter, but Rudy Gobert just has way better feet in the perimeter. It's like Rudy Gobert and Hanson Yang's feet got reversed on defense and offense. Like, Rudy Gobert is a brilliant defender with brilliant feet. Hanson Yang's like that on offense, but then on defense, he's not the most controlled with his feet, laterally wise, especially when he's moving. So that's another guy. It's like, will the NBA be too fast for him? Will the pace limit his ceiling? Those are real questions, but he's got real offensive tools, and who knows what he's going to be in the NBA defensively. He won Defensive Player of the Year in the Chinese Basketball Association, which is something. It is something. We'll see how that translates in the NBA, but it's certainly something. Maybe he's a good rim protector in the NBA. I'm not as certain about that as Kalkbrenner, but he does have some of that size and prowess in that remark that Kalkbrenner possesses. So those are my 6 players I would love Minnesota to consider if they stay put in this 2025 NBA draft. But there's also options. You can never count it out. Minnesota trading up, because they did it last year for Rob Dillingham. Picks 17 and 31 are fairly valuable. Maybe those can move you up a few spots. Maybe there's avenues we're not even considering. Like, I don't know. What if something crazy like a sign and trade happened with Nikhil, then you got to pick tomorrow? I'm pretty sure Minnesota can agree to extensions right now. Whatever extensions or sign and trades that would happen, they aren't official until July, but I'm pretty sure Minnesota can do things like that. So there's some optionality in those ways, but there's one name I would really love Minnesota to go after if it's ever so possible to do so. And that name is Common Malwak. Another guy with long arms. He's got, I believe, a 7'6" wingspan as well. But he's just, in my opinion, just among all draftees, to me, he's got one of the 5 highest ceilings in the draft. He's 5th on my board this year. He's a freshman. He played in Africa. He came to the NBA this year, played with Duke. He didn't put up these like gaudy stats, but he was a legitimate starter on Duke. He was automatic, over 80% at the rim, I believe, around the basket. He's got touch. He's huge. I believe in his long-term jumper. It looks good. He just didn't need to shoot a lot of threes at Duke. So he didn't really do that. But he's got a decent-looking shot. He is automatic around the rim. You know, just for an old comparison, offensively, he kind of reminds me of a more nimble Gorgui Dieng. Because Gorgui also was a huge person too, and he had good touch around the basket. Common moves better than Gorgui, in my opinion. And Gorgui, you know, I wouldn't say he moved horribly in the NBA, but I think Common Malwak moves better than Gorgui. And by the way, I'm kind of functioning on my 12-year-old memory right now, watching Gorgui Dieng when I was a little kid. I think I'm right on that. He was the 20th pick in 2013. I think he moved pretty fine. Maybe I have to go back and break down the tape specifically to verify that. But from my memory, Gorgui Dieng moved fairly well. Bakama moves better. He's got really high-level defensive upside, kind of like Rudy Gobert in this way. He alters a lot of shots, but you would think he would block more shots than he does. He averaged less than 2 blocks a game, but he was still one of the best rim protectors in college basketball this year. He's got, I think, long-term potential being a versatile defender in the NBA. I just think he's got really high-level talent. And let's just say Minnesota wanted to get really just they're feeling a little bit, couple tequilas, they're just feeling a little dangerous. Like, do I trade up to pick 7, pick 8? If they have that chance to do it, man, I wouldn't have a huge issue with it if they calm him out, if they get Coby White, because I think I have really good confidence that this guy could be Rudy Gobert's long-term replacement when he's ready at the NBA level. I'm that high on Malwalk. And granted, Anthony Edwards, Rob Dillingham, Jaden, Malwalk, Shannon in 5 years, man, that's like my Wolf dream right there. So I'm really excited about his potential in the NBA, whether he's in Minnesota, whether he isn't. I would really hope he's in Minnesota, but I know that's a long shot. Never say never, right? But it does feel like that wouldn't be the most popular scenario. But you know what? You never know. If there was a world to trade up for a guy like Coby White, I would definitely happily pursue that. And now we're going to close this show, episode 4 of Wilder Wolves, with 2 mock trades that 2 followers gave as fun hypotheticals for Minnesota to aggressively trade up. Not just trade up, aggressively trade up. And I love any scenario possible. So let's look at these 2 mock trades that I got this evening, starting at number 1, okay? So we're going to start. This isn't as, out of reach as the last trade that we're going to mention, but it's a fun scenario. The Timberwolves and the Chicago Bulls engage in a trade. And this isn't only a trade involving pick swaps. Big names are involved in this trade. So the trade, Minnesota sends out Julius Randle, sign and trade. Pick 17, pick 31. The Chicago Bulls bring back Coby White, Patrick Williams, and the 12th selection in this year's draft. Interesting trade. The person who made this is his account's name, StreamStack Z247, and he sent that on the YouTube. So it's an interesting trade scenario. I think this would be a really hard trade to make before draft night because it's involving the Julius Randle situation and the Coby White situation. And I think if these teams swap picks, I feel like both teams would want to know who they're taking on their own control. For example, Minnesota trades a 12. I'm just assuming they would want to make that pick and not just take who Chicago wants to pick, right? So that might be the obstacle in this trade scenario if everybody agreed to it, getting it done at the speed in which both teams can make the selections that they want with their draft picks. So that's going to be the question without even breaking down the trade itself. So my first thought is, I don't personally think this makes Minnesota better. If there's somebody that they love at 12, then great. But as much as Coby White is great and how as fun as he is and has electric he is as a scorer, like he got the Gilbert Arenas comps in college. He's got that type of game. He's a microwave guy. He can go crazy. He's got talent, man. I don't think he's a better player than Julius Randle. And I don't think we've seen just enough of Coby White yet to know exactly what he is in the playoffs. And I know Julius Randle wasn't a playoff player until last year, theoretically, and he still had a bad conference finals. But I'm not confident Minnesota's getting better on this trade by swapping Julius Randle and Coby White. I'm comfortable saying Julius Randle is still a better player as somebody who's still an all-star caliber talent. He showed that in the second half of this year. He showed that in the playoffs. Took time to figure out his role, but he showed he can be a high-level number 2 option in the Western Conference because he was that in the conference finals. So I don't feel good about that swap right there, Coby White and Julius Randle. And then pick 17 and 12. Who knows who's there? Like, I just went on my monologue about Kama Malwalk. Like, if he was there at 12, man, I'd be thrilled. And maybe that would make me feel a little better about this trade. But my first thought is those elements, I don't think Minnesota should do that trade personally. And Patrick Williams' contract is not good. He is not living up to the 4th overall selection he was in 2020, the Anthony Edwards draft. And that contract in this modern Timberwolves roster, especially when you're about to pay Coby White, that feels like a big liability. When Minnesota just got out of a lot of their financial concern by moving off of Cat's contract, because as great as Cat is, we know that contract making over $60 million was going to be a very massive question. So my final thoughts on this first trade, I wouldn't do this trade. And I like Coby White. He's fun. He'd be fun next to Anthony Edwards, but I don't think this elevates the ceiling on this team enough to make such a drastic move. Now let's look at this final trade for this episode of Wilder Wolves. So this last trade is a very big and very bold one. And I will consider every scenario possible just because as fans in this offseason, the speculation is as fun as honestly in a lot of times regular season games. So I am here for this speculation, but Hustle Play 3000 on X, his mock trade. And I'm not sure on either of these trades that the money works or how that would work. Okay. We're throwing hypotheticals here that make enough sense that, in the fan mind, maybe it's possible. That's kind of what we're doing right here. But this trade, Nickeil Alexander-Walker sign and trade. 17, Julius Randle, Mike Conley for Paul George and the 3rd overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft, which would give the Timberwolves the draft rights to VJ Edgecombe from Baylor. That's the hypothetical here. And that is interesting. That is a crazy scenario. So there's a lot of elements here. First of all, similar logic to the last trade. Might be a lot to get this together before the draft. Maybe if this happened, it might be when Andrew Wiggins got drafted by the Cavs and ended up in Minnesota somehow. Maybe it would be something like that. I don't know. But I do think this. I think this is an interesting trade for Philadelphia because you're getting off of the Paul George contract, which is looking really bad in his mid-30s. He's making over $40 million a year. He had the worst season, arguably, since his rookie year this year. So that's potentially a big positive for them. Mike Conley, same thing for Minnesota. We don't know what Mike Conley is going to look like long-term. So, you could say similar things on both sides there. But back to Philadelphia. You're trading Paul George. You're getting off that contract. You're getting Julius Randle, who's a better player than Paul George. And you're getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's going to be one of the most coveted sign and trade assets this offseason because Nickeil basically fits in every single type of context on an NBA team, and he's such a nice player. A lot of teams are going to like that. This might sound weird. I don't think this is a great trade for either teams. And I'm not saying that saying the trade idea is bad. I think this is freaking entertaining as heck. But I don't think this improves anybody's outlook. And here's why. I really think VJ Edgecombe could be a massive fit for Philadelphia. And I think he can really be a part of that second timeline movement alongside Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain. A couple months ago, I would have said too many guards, but with Indiana and OKC in the finals, that's not true. You can have 3 really good guards. So losing that movement would be unfortunate for them, but also Paul George is still a good player when he's healthy. Maybe Paul George has had a down year and things will line up for him because he was playing through injuries last year. Maybe next year he's a little healthier, he's more rested, and he goes back to playing like 90% the player he was on the Clippers, and that is what they want, and that's what they need. So if that happens, they lose on VJ's upside, and they lose Paul George, who could come back and bounce back. That's a big risk, especially because I don't think Julius Randle and Joel Embiid is a great fit. I've had friends joke around that Julius Randle is kind of like a 6'8" Joel Embiid, and I kind of see it in a way with the way Randle, comes in young as a bruising, versatile big, becomes this perimeter creator who can jab, hit a step back. Some people question the ball movement from time to time, even though Julius Randle became much more of a connector in the second half of this year with Minnesota versus the first half. So those are the big questions with Randle and Joel Embiid. They might be really redundant. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I really like, but I'm not sure he would be coveted enough as an asset to trade the third pick for. Pick 17 is nice, right? Like, we're talking about potential good players. Minnesota could take at 17, and that's possible for Philadelphia. But there's no doubt the third overall pick is a significantly greater asset than Minnesota's selection this year. So I don't think Philadelphia would do this. And Minnesota, like the fit with VJ is really interesting because he's in a lot of ways a diet Anthony Edwards in terms of the physical prototype and the intensity and some of the stuff he could do around the rim. Maybe long-term creation upside. Like, he could become a Victor Oladipo type player in the NBA, in my opinion. And Victor Oladipo is a poor man's Anthony Edwards. So that might be fun. Minnesota still really needs a point guard in this scenario long-term. Unless not long-term. I still believe in Rob Dillingham, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's really interesting. Maybe Paul George is also a big-time player for Minnesota and healthy. That would be great. But it's also equally possible it's a horrible contract in the Anthony Edwards timeline. So considering Minnesota's side, dealing three players who are in the rotation on a Western Conference Finals team for two major question marks, maybe rewarding question marks, but could also very much not be rewarding. I think it's too risky for Minnesota, and I think it's too risky for Philadelphia. I don't think either team would do this, but I do really appreciate that trade offer. I think that's a super fun scenario. And the more scenarios that we get on my Twitter, on my social media, definitely reach those out to me, and we'll cover those on the show and just, consider all the possible ideas and avenues the Timberwolves can take this offseason and beyond. But with that being said, that is going to do it for episode 4 of Wilder Wolves. I will not post a show during draft day. I'll post right after a reaction. I'm hoping to get a really good guest on the show Thursday to react to the Timberwolves selection. And then we have the first ever Wolves Fandom Friday episode. I got 3 people coming on the show. We'll be talking about some of the biggest topics in Wolves land, and there's going to be plenty with the new owners, the draft picks. So we'll have plenty to talk about this Friday, and we'll keep going into the offseason, into free agency, summer league, etc. It's going to be a fun time, and I appreciate everybody who's been a part of it in this early journey of Wilder Wolves. So thank you all so much. This is Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom.